Okay, thanks for joining us and welcome to the Sussex Sport Podcast Transfer Special. Today we're joined by Brighton and Hove Albion writers Frankie, Elliott and Sam Morton. Plus we also have with us columnist and lifelong Albion fan Ian Hart. Welcome to everybody. So we're just more than a month into the transfer window, and it's been a pretty busy one so far for Albion as they prepare for Europa League and Premier League football next term. The main highlights on the incoming front have been the 30 million record arrival of Brazilian attacker João Pedro and the 16 million capture of goalkeeper Bart Verbruggen from Anderlecht on a 5-year deal. Veteran midfielder James Milner also arrived from Liverpool after 8 successful years at Anfield, and playmaker Mahoud Dahoud also came on a free transfer from Borussia Dortmund. The club also wrapped up a deal for Romanian 17-year-old Mazzuli, who joins in January. And while on the outgoings, Alexis McAllister has been the main man to exit as he joined Liverpool for an initial fee of 35 million. So, Frankie, let's start with the latest. Igor to Brighton. Is it going to happen? And does that mean Albion have admitted defeat in trying to land Levi Colwill from Chelsea?
It almost seems like pretty much a done deal in regards to the fact that the personal terms have already been agreed between the player and the club. That normally associates with a fee just needing to be agreed. So the sort of icing on the cake needing to be done with the deal, so to speak. So it looks like that's been confirmed. Around 15 million pounds, which is a good price for a player that's played in Serie A at the top level of Serie A and was also part of a team that got to the Europa Conference League final last year, obviously losing to West Ham in the final. So they picked up what should be a good player for a not too astronomical fee. In regards to Levi Colwill, it sounds to me like that deal is off. I don't think it was ever really on, to be honest. I think Chelsea's stance was very clear. They wanted to keep hold of the player. Whether Levi Colwill wants to stay, that remains to be seen. I feel that he's very much, from the way he's spoken during the end of his time at Brighton and also his time with England and the under-21s, he's very focused on playing first-team football next season. That's his top priority, whether that be at Chelsea or away from Stamford Bridge. Chelsea seem to say, and Pochettino seems to be saying, that he wants to offer him that. He sees him as a big part of his squad. The left-sided centre-back role, obviously they have Benoit Badiashile there at the moment, who signed an 8-year deal in January when he joined the club. But Koulibaly was also a left-sided centre-back who's just left. So there is a position there. Whether he wants to contest with Badiashile for that role is, like I say, yet to be seen. I don't think he's spoken to Pochettino yet. That talk still needs to take place about what his role in the club will be. So whether Cole stays at Chelsea, we're not sure, but I don't think his next club will be Brighton because I don't think they can actually afford him. The £40 million fee they put in is their second bid was rejected. I think Chelsea are probably looking for something north of 50 million, which I don't think Brighton can afford. But in regards to Brighton's search for a left-sided defender, obviously Igor is that, but they're also linked with Calvin Bassey, the Ajax defender, who was formerly at Rangers. I think they still might go for him as well because their left side of the defence is still looking a bit weak in regards to the amount of players that they can use in that position. Obviously, Pervis Estupiñán is the only recognised left back in the team that was brilliant in his first season at the club last year. They also have the Polish left back who's come back off loan, Michael Karbanik. I doubt that he will be kept around at the club next year as a backup. So I feel that someone like Bassey, who would be available for around 15 to 20 million pounds, I think they might look towards him as an addition to the squad that's got European experience and international experience as well, looking ahead to their season next season when they're obviously competing on full front. So it's the end of the Colwill the story, and in regards to the Colwill transfer, that seems to be dead in the water. But in regards to Brighton's business in their backline, I still think they might have one more deal to push through.
Yeah, shame on Colwill. And you think Bassey could be on top of Igor?
I do. I think, judging by the way Brighton have normally operate in these windows, I think they're looking at the idea that they could have spent 40 million on one player and one of the best young defenders in the country and possibly in Europe as well. That would have been a real statement of their intent for next season. But I think they might operate in getting two players that are a bit older, a bit more streetwise, but certainly have the skill level to compete in the Europa League and at the top end of the Premier League as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Moises Caicedo. The talks with Chelsea seem quite complex, Ian. On the one hand, Chelsea are determined to take Caicedo from Brighton, but Brighton would happily take Levi Colwill and probably Conor Gallagher as well. How do you see this being resolved to the satisfaction of both clubs?
Well, I can only see it being resolved if Brighton get £100 million for Moses Caicedo, be that from Chelsea or be that from Liverpool. I think Tony Bloom is sticking to his guns. He's almost the poster boy for everybody outside the perceived top 6 or 7. You know, all of the big guns, thinking they can ride roughshod over people when it comes to transfers. And I think Tony is the sort of the trailblazer for the other 13 clubs in the Premier League. And brilliant stuff, really. Liverpool coming into the mix if Jordan Henderson goes on his Saudi Arabian dream. Because although, frankly, you know, 700 grand a week is obscene. But if someone's silly enough to pay it, fair enough. But I do think we are going to stand firm. I was talking to some Chelsea fans at the Worthing Bognor game on Saturday, and they weren't too impressed that Chelsea were going to pay 100 million, but they thought they would have to if they want their man.
Yeah.
Or as we said in the podcast last week, goods to the value.
I.e. Levi Colwill and perhaps Conor Gallagher. Yeah. Well, we'll see. It's going to be an interesting. They're still, as we sort of has been reported, they're still in talks at the moment. So we'll just have to wait and see how that one plays out. But Sam, so they've lost McAllister, World Cup winner Alexis McAllister, and now probably Caicedo as well. How do you see Albion's midfield shaping up next term? And do they still need extra signings if they lose both? Bearing in mind there's Billy Gilmore waiting for his chance. They still have Pascal Gross. Stephen Alzate has come back after a good loan in Belgium. Adam Lallana, Yasunari, and possibly Jacob Moda. Do they still need anyone else?
Yeah, well, of course, obviously losing McAllister and Caicedo should massively affect any team, really, and you'd expect Brighton to struggle to replace them. But I remember saying the same thing last year when they lost Basuma and Cucurella. So obviously Albion are the masters at replacing the irreplaceable. So you'd like to think that they can cope. And obviously you mentioned Dahoud, and if he hits the ground running, could be the perfect replacement for McAllister. He's only 27 years old, so his arrival was an exciting one, really. Serbi said recently that he wanted Dahoud when he was at Sussex and is sure he's going to be a top player. So he's kind of already had that in mind previously and wanted to bring him in. So yeah, hopefully he does the same for Brighton, has a big impact, and he kind of operates as a deep line playmaker and has lots of experience playing at high level in Germany, which can only be crucial for the Europa League, as obviously he's played in Europe before as well. And there was the feeling in Germany that he could be the ideal replacement for Gundogan when he left for Man City. And although he never really lived up to that, Gundogan really came to life at Man City and started scoring more goals. And maybe Dahoud can have the same kind of impact and follow the same kind of trend. And obviously you have Billy Gilmore as well. He's obviously come to life in recent months, had a big impact towards the end of last season. He was excellent for Scotland during the run of impressive victories that they had, and had fans raving about him on social media at the time. So he really seems to be gathering momentum going into this new season, and you can pretty much guarantee he's going to play more than he did last year as well. And he seems to still be enjoying playing under Serbi, and it can only be a good thing that he's going to get more playing time and improve as a player. And obviously you mentioned James Milner coming in as well, brings that level of experience, and although he's obviously not going to probably play every week, he does bring that real kind of versatility and experience in key areas, and is highly capable of having a big impact when called upon. And yeah, as you say, Alzate and Moda could potentially be like new signings when they come into the team. And there are obviously question marks about what kind of impact they'll have and if they can stay fit. But yeah, I think they obviously have a lot of numbers there and players there that can do a job. But obviously any more players they can bring in will be a bonus.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. If they can reach, it's going to be tough because Caicedo and McAllister are at such high levels, aren't they? And it's going to be interesting to see if those players coming in can match that or get close to it. But what other positions that Albion need to bolster, Frankie, as they progress through the transfer window?
Yeah, so we've already discussed the sort of left-sided defensive issues that they have. The left-sided centre-back is their top priority, which is obviously they're dealing with in signing Igor. I feel that a left-back is still needed as well, whether it's that as backup or competition to Estupinian, which I believe Bassi would be if they were to sign him. And then also looking throughout the pitch, the midfield area is interesting because they've actually got a number of central midfielders now. They've got almost 7 central midfield options. Whether or not these are players that are of the same calibre or level as Caicedo's, as you just said, we're yet to see. I feel that there might be a late move in the window for a centre mid after De Zerbi has assessed his options, because he's trusting a lot of new players. I know Gilmour was there last year, but he wasn't really given that much responsibility until the end of the season when he started to play a couple more games. I remember Manchester United at home, he had a standout performance when he started, and Wolves at home as well. Also, people like Alzati, they're coming back off a very successful loan move at Standard Liège, but we don't know how he will play in the Premier League, nor do we know how Dahoud will play. So I feel he will have to assess whether they're capable enough to play as his starting 2 midfielders before he makes a decision about whether they sign another midfielder. And then the other glaring issue for me is a right winger. They played a 4-2-3-1 for much of last season, with Solly March being the main man that played out on the wide right. When he got injured, they used Facundo Buonate, who is still getting used to English football, which is obvious because he's only 19 years old and he's played all his football in South America before this. And he's not really a right winger. It normally operates as a central attacking mid. They also tried Julio Enciso out there. Again, his preferred position is centre forward. So they haven't really got an out-and-out right winger. Pascal Gross obviously can play as a wide right player, but he prefers to be a bit more of a defensive option. So someone in that attacking area, I think this is why they're looking at someone like Palmer, someone who can operate maybe in that sort of along the front line behind the striker role, who can offer
the Man City on loan, yeah.
The Man City loanee, who was again played a major role in England winning the under-21 Euros competition recently in Georgia and Romania. So I feel that another player in that attacking area that can play predominantly on the wide right might be sort of, because Solly March, as great a player as he is very susceptible to injuries, and certainly will be feeding those niggles that he normally feels playing 3 times a week.
Yeah. Ian, Albion, they paid more than 16 million for the goalkeeper Bart Verbruggen. He hasn't arrived to sit on the bench, has he? How do you see that, and what does that mean for Steele and Sanchez?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Ian. Yeah.
You say that, but goalkeepers seem to, go on as long as Tom Jones, don't they? So, he's here for the long term, and he is developing. So I think if he has to stay on the bench, if he has to get his chances here and there, I think Sanchez is a busted flush. He's gone. I think we'll start with Jason in the goals, in nets against Luton Town. And I think that this new young lad will basically learn from a very good keeper that we've got in Jason Steele. Can I just throw something back to you three about the Caicedo thing before we move on?
Yeah, go for it.
Do you think we will hold out for the 100 million? So therefore, if they don't pay it, he will line up against Luton Town.
Well, I think personally, if we had Conor Gallagher and Levi Colwell in return, I think that would be a straight swap. And personally, I would be quite happy with that. How the negotiations will go in amongst that is hard to tell. But I think a straight swap with those 2 players, that they get Caicedo, we get Colwell and Gallagher. But it's difficult to see whether that one will go through, because.
But if that doesn't go through, Derren, if that doesn't go through, and Bowley won't pay the 100 million, and Jurgen Klopp can't raise the 100 million. Did we ever think we'd say that about Liverpool? Do you think Moses will be lining up against Luton Town at 3:00 on the 12th of August?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's still contracted to Brighton. The transfer window is until September, so the Premier League starts before the transfer window shuts. So he could be. I don't think Caicedo would be happy about that.
But they had it in January, didn't they, when Arsenal were going all guns blazing, trying to sign him, and they held out for the money they wanted, and kind of against all all kind of signs and signals that he was going to Arsenal. He did stay, and he lined up again for Brighton. So I think Brighton have previous in keeping players if they don't get the money they want.
It's foolish from Chelsea anyway. I can't believe this. I mean, it shows that how poorly run Chelsea are at the moment, because this deal should have been done by now. If you look at the top clubs like Manchester City and Liverpool, when they get a deal manoeuvred, it's done within a week or two. For some reason at the moment, this deal is taking nearly over a month now, I'd say, before this was first broke that Chelsea are interested in Caicedo. They know the asking price. Well, they know the history of Brighton, and they're not going to manoeuvre from that asking price. I don't know why they're taking so long to try and negotiate this deal. It's not helpful to Caicedo. It's not helpful to them. It's not helpful to Pochettino. So it's not Brighton's. This is how Brighton work, and it works best for them. I think it just is a glaring issue in Chelsea in the negotiation skills at the moment.
Just to pick up on what you said about Caicedo not being happy, he can't really blame Brighton. Brighton have said what they want. We want 100 million, or goods to the value, the old phrase. If no one's going to come up with that, the player and his agent, they can't really complain, can they?
I think, no, ideally. I think because Brighton, he didn't get his move last January, so this would be the second transfer window where he hasn't got his move. So I think that would play into it, and I think that would annoy him. But he would have to get his head down and play on if Brighton, if no one matches 100 million valuation. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, and one for De Zerbi to manage. That's going to be a tricky one, I think, if he doesn't go.
And that's also a part of Brighton's transfer policy as well. As much as they hold out for the sum they believe they're due, they also are respectful to the player that wants to leave. They don't stand in anyone's way. They don't try and halt a player from moving on. If Caicedo is desperate to move, they are worth. They're not saying no to the transfer, but they're just looking for a price that they see as reasonable. And like I said before, Chelsea is still negotiating around the £70 million mark, we believe, at the moment, which is what was rejected in January. So if Caicedo is angry at anyone, he should be at Chelsea, if truth be told.
Yeah. Well, one signing that has gone through, Sam, João Pedro, an exciting arrival. He looks as though he could make a real impact this year. What do you think he'll bring, and what positions do you think he can play? He'll be competing sort of for minutes with the likes of Mitoma, Enciso, Ferguson, Welbeck, Undav, March, Sarmiento, Bonetti, and also Simon Andriga. That's quite a selection dilemma, isn't it? And a lot of options for Albion to have in attack.
It is, absolutely. And that can only be a good thing, that kind of competition for places and everyone knowing that they have to perform at a high level, or there's someone right behind them that will take their position. Obviously, assuming that Evan Ferguson's going to be the top striker, as he's the most prolific and has been for the last year, you'd expect him to only improve this season. You'd expect maybe Pedro to play in and around him, maybe just behind him, or he is quite versatile, so he can play in any of those kind of forward positions. And obviously there will be an element of pressure on him after arriving for a record fee. And as I say, plenty of people will obviously be ready to take his place if he doesn't live up to that. And but I think it's a perfect environment for him. It's a very attacking team. De Zerbi loves to play on the front foot, and I think that can only help his game, really. And to have that number of attacking options is a great thing, and something Brighton have not been blessed with in recent seasons, really, having that number of players in forward areas that can make a difference. So that's a really good sign. And in terms of Pedro, Chris Wilder, who coached him, was quoted in The Athletic recently as saying he's a super talented player who's sometimes brilliant and sometimes frustrating, but he wants to win, and there's no doubt about it. And it's a great move. He said he needed to get out of Watford because he was the main man. Now he won't be the main man at Brighton. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on with that, and can really improve a team that's sort of obviously on the ascendancy. And he's athletically strong, quick, and he's got the ability to see a pass, and he can finish as well. So I think it's a good move for him, really, and it's definitely encouraging for Brighton. He obviously brings a bit of Brazilian flair as well, so that'd be good to get fans off the seats.
Yeah. Ian, 30 million, João Pedro, you happy with that?
Very, very happy. I've heard from a very reliable source that he is world class, and those were the words of Luther Blissett, the Watford legend, who says this boy's something very, very special. So I'm very excited to see him, and as you said, Sam, playing with Ferguson. and playing off each other. I think Ferguson is he is a bit like a footballing version of Halley's Comet. That players like this only come along once in a generation, and I think we need to celebrate him. We need to nurture him. We need to develop him. I'm sure one day he'll go on to bigger and better things. But who knows? Him and Pedro could be the Peter Ward and Ian Mellor of their generation. That's one for the teenagers. So yeah, no, look, I'm really excited, and quality players. And look, we talk about Caicedo, we talk about losing McAllister. Players come and go. All right, that is what football clubs are about. Players come, they play, they go. Managers come, they manage, they go. Coaches, even directors, even chairmen. The fans are the constant. We've got a really exciting squad now. Arguably, even losing McAllister and Caicedo, with the players that we've got in, this is the best Albion squad we've ever had. We've just got to celebrate that. We've got to sit back and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, Frankie. So Pedro, 21, Ferguson, 18, Bonetti, he's 18. It's looking quite promising, isn't it?
It is, and it's also that I have to say, as much as it being a young team with lots of exciting players, who we've already seen examples of their greatness in Cisso's 2 goal of the season contenders last year. He's only 19. Evan Ferguson as well, after what was a brilliant stand-up season for him last year. Gilmore's still a very young player. Ayari's still coming through. We're still yet to see what he can bring to the table. So there's a lot of exciting talents in that club. Plus the fact they've brought back 2 loan players, Adjurnia and Alzate. Obviously, we've seen Alzate before, but in glimpses. So bringing those 2 players in as well, which is basically like 2 new signings. There's a lot to be excited about. I have to say, if I was a Brighton fan, the fact that you've lost Caicedo and McAllister, I would say is replaced by the fact you've got an excitement of seeing the next Caicedo and McAllister in the crop of young players that are coming through. The only issue I would say at the moment is they've got too many players in some regards, because now De Zerbi's got an issue of who his best starting team is. Obviously, there are players that won't be dropped from last season. He will know what his best team is in that sense. But he's lost 2 of his best. Well, potentially, he's definitely lost 1 of his best players. He could be losing the second one very soon. How he works around that with all these influx of loanees coming back and new signings might be quite a tricky one. Yeah,
it's the opposite problem to last season, isn't it, Sam? They were stretched in the run-in where they really struggled with injuries and at that time, and now. How does he balance that? Because once all the players are fit, all the new signings come in, it's a totally different dynamic in the squad, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I mentioned, the competition for places can only help. But it is definitely an issue for De Zerbi to work out, really. I mean, obviously he did complain a few times about the number of players he had to pick from last season, so he definitely can't complain about the same thing now. So it will be interesting to see how he gets on. And but I think it can only be a good thing if you've got lots of players to pick from, and if someone's not performing, or if you've got injuries, especially playing in Europe, you can probably assume there'll be some injuries, and you have to rotate the squad a fair bit. So I think maybe having a bigger squad can only be a good thing. It can really help them compete on all fronts. Yeah.
Just on Matoma, Frankie, there was very tentative link earlier in the window with a move to Saudi Arabia, which has since gone very quiet. But as Ian touched upon earlier, it's impossible to ignore the impact that Saudi money has had, hasn't it, on this window and future windows. Well, what do you make of it all? And you can see why players in their 30s are tempted to go over. But do you think top players in their prime are going to be heading in that way as well?
Yeah, I do. This is probably going to be the biggest thing in football for the next couple of years. It's the money is clearly there, and it's not going anywhere as well. This is probably the richest state-backed football league in the world, much bigger than any European football club can offer. The standard of football obviously isn't quite there yet. Obviously, they're not going to be playing at the same level they would be in any of the top European leagues, but I think we're less than 12 months away from someone like Mbappe being offered a deal there. I think obviously Bernardo Silva is the one that's going to be the biggest splash, a player that's been one of the best players in Europe for the last 3 or 4 years, still very much in his prime. If he moves, that could be a catalyst for a number of other players coming over who are still playing at the top of their game. We're now seeing people like Mitrovic as well, who was one of the best strikers in the Premier League last year. He looks set to be leaving for Saudi Arabia. Yeah. I think this is now a seismic shift in football. It's nothing really that can be done. There's no thing that FIFA or UEFA can do from outside of Saudi Arabia. If the Saudi Arabian Football League decide to put a ban on the number of players that are brought in from foreign players that are playing in each team, that's the only thing that can really stop this seismic shift. We've already seen Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the biggest players in the history of football, playing in Saudi Arabia as well. So I think over the next 2, 3, 4 years, we're going to see many more players going over, because you just can't argue with the money. I mean, there is arguments, of course, about they obviously still are millionaires anyway. Why do they need any more money when you're offered that sum of, as Hart alluded to earlier, when you're being offered triple your wage, even as a multi-millionaire? It's hard to turn down, because football is only a short career. You don't know if you're an injury away from it all coming to an end. So I can't argue with it. I don't see it as a problem. I think this is something that football has to adapt to. I think Europe has been the biggest footballing continent since the 60s. There are many people that would argue that Brazilian leagues before that were the dominant force before Europe stole all their best players. So this is just happening the other way around, where Europe's losing all of its best players to a new footballing league. I think it should be embraced, and it should be seen as an exciting move.
Ian, we've seen it in the golf. We've seen the big boxing events in Saudi Arabia. Is football going to be changing?
Unfortunately, boys, I'm a lot older than you, and I've met a few football managers in my time. The two biggest motivations of the overwhelming majority of professional footballers are days off and money. Throw a bit of sunshine in, and you've got your answer. Sadly, that this is going to be a real issue. The one thing I hope they don't do, but I heard it mooted on a national radio station the other week when the Jordan Henderson thing blew up, is to placate them. Do they get them entry into the Champions League? I can't see it, but it's been something that's been suggested all the time. This money is being offered. They will go for it. You mentioned Live Golf. Look, we've got their world heavyweight champion, the baddest man on the planet, fighting a bloke who's never fought in a boxing ring before for money, because the Saudis have put that up. They are capable of anything when it comes to money and sport. I'm afraid we've just got to strap ourselves in, because I think it's going to be a tough few years, because players will have their heads turned. Who can blame Jordan Henderson with that kind of money? Yeah. Ronaldo's gone. You cannot blame them. And unfortunately, the Saudis have got it in spades, haven't they? So it'll keep coming. It'll keep coming. They have seen what a global sport. Football has always been a global sport, but the EPL is now a global brand. Who'd have thought when Mickey Adams was taking the Albion to the Republic of Ireland for a pre-season tour? That was the height of sophistication for us Brighton fans, going to the Republic of Ireland. And now, as we speak, they're flying out to America to play against other Premier League teams. But it's all brand building. It's all building that big brand, that global brand. When I went to Australia for the Ashes, you can watch every Premier League game by touching the red button. Whenever it is, every Premier League game is available on Australian TV. And I'm sure it's the same in America. When I went to Chicago, I've sat with the Chicago Brighton and Hove Albion supporters club watching a game at 7:30 in a boozer. 7:30 in the morning, that is, not 7:30 in the evening. So it is there. And unfortunately, the Saudis have got the money. They can effectively buy our beautiful game, and there's nothing we can really, really do about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting change, isn't it? How it all develops, and whether they will end up competing in, alongside the likes of Man United and alongside the likes of Liverpool in these tournaments as well. So it's interesting. But back to Brighton.
Yeah.
So Ian, Joel Veltman, he signed a new 2-year deal. Sensible business by the looks of it. But how do you see that right side of the Brighton team with Tariq Lamptey? Are you a fan of Lamptey?
I see Veltman as one of the greatest ever buys for value for money in the club's history. Yeah. I think, we picked him up for a song. It was about £800,000, which is a round of drinks now, isn't it, when you're talking about your Casados and your McAllisters? It's excellent value. I've always been a big Lamptey fan. I know he had these issues with his hamstrings. And, that's something you can't fix overnight.
No.
I still think we've got more to see from Lamptey. He's a very exciting player. Do you remember a few years ago when we all thought he'd be our first £50 million player?
Yeah. Well, when he came in, there was rumours of Bayern Munich, Man United. There was, there was talk of that, wasn't there? So yeah, it'd be good to see him back flying again.
But Sam, I'm a big fan of Veltman. Big fan of Veltman.
Yeah, it's a good combination, isn't it, to have the steady, reliable Veltman and then Tariq Lamptey, you can have that pace as well. So we've got Ian touched on it, Sam. We've got the Premier League Summer Series to America. Will be sort of the first chance for Brighton to integrate some of their new signings. What do you make of Albion's trip to America, and how important do you think it will be in terms of building team spirit ahead of that first match on August the 12th?
Yeah, I think it'd be great. It'd be a good experience playing in a different country, which obviously Brighton will have to get used to playing in the Europa League this season. I think it'd be great. I think some of the players have probably not experienced before. Kind of that kind of road trip, and it might build that, as you say, that team spirit and get in the atmosphere in the kind of harmony inside the squad. Obviously, some of the new signings that have come in, it'd be a good chance for them to meet their new teammates and to kind of really see how it's going to work under De Zerbi this season, and De Zerbi's first chance at trying to work out who his players are, who's going to be in his starting team for Luton. So plenty of questions to answer, and I think the trip to America can only help, really. And obviously they are playing against teams that are in the Premier League, so you can really test yourself against teams that you are going to be playing in the season. So yeah, I think it'd be good. It'd be a good chance for the squad to get to know each other and get some harmony going in the squad. Yeah.
Frankie, did you ever envisage a time where Brighton versus Brentford pre-season would sell out in America?
No, I can't say I would, but it's a testament to both those sides. I mean, it's one of those things you would say. I remember when the Premier League was talking about having a 39th game abroad to promote the Premier League at the end of the 2010. The end of the noughties, about 2008, 2009, and people were saying, would people in China really want to watch Stoke City versus Bolton Wanderers? And I guess that same question would be thrown this way. But Brighton and Brentford have been a testament to the two best run clubs in England, you would argue, with very small budgets. They've managed to not only sustain themselves in the Premier League or get to the Premier League as well, but be two of the most attractive teams in there, competing in the top 10 for both times, and competing in Europe for European places for much of last season. So they deserve to be promoted in America for sure.
Yeah, you're right. They do seem to be two of the best run teams. They don't waste money, do they? When you compare sort of their transfer fees with Man United and Chelsea, and how they sort of squander some of their money over the years. It's quite impressive, isn't it, Ian? How they work in the transfer market.
Yeah, well, like you say, it's two excellently run clubs. It's quite bizarre. I think 42 years ago, in July 1981, I went to see Brighton play Brentford at Griffin Park in a pre-season friendly. Jimmy Case made his debut for Brighton. Bob Booker scored twice. Bradley Walsh was on the bench, I think, for Brentford, and they won 3-1. How times have changed. I do actually feel sorry for Brentford with the treatment of Ivan Toney, and it does sort of smack of a little bit of double standards. I think Toney should have been integrated and rehabilitated with his gambling, rather than just casting him aside and saying that he can't train until September, he can't play until Jan. But obviously that's another issue. But no, two really good sides. And there's also that little bit of needle, because I understand from sources close to the club, the chairmen don't get on with each other.
No, that's quite well. They're quite competitive with when it comes to how they operate, aren't they? So,
obviously Tony Bloom famously doesn't go in the director's box when Brighton play Brentford. He actually goes and sits with the fans. I think it's partly because he's always not building bridges because he's got a lot of bridges with the fans, and he really is a man of the people. But I don't think I'm not saying it's on the realms of Ian Chappell and Ian Botham, but I don't think you'll be seeing them at Donatello's very, very soon, having a table for two.
No, I don't think there'll be too many transfers between the two clubs. But, so the window's still open. Closes on September the 1st. Sam, can you see Brighton smashing their transfer window again, transfer record again before the window closes? Obviously 30 million is the record they paid for João Pedro. And what other signings would you like to see Brighton make?
I think, it could all depend on what happens with Caicedo, really. I think if he was to leave for 100 million, that's suddenly a massive amount of money to spend. And potentially, if something comes up, they can try and get a big name in, as obviously Brighton is definitely becoming a more attractive proposition for players. And obviously they're in Europe as well. So you never know. But in terms of what player I'd like to see Mohamed Kudus come in from Ajax. Things have gone quite quiet in terms of news on that front. But he's such a quality young player that was brilliant at the World Cup. And he really impressed me then. And it was quite exciting to see Brighton linked with him a couple of months ago. And as I say, things have gone quiet. So I'm not too sure if that's still in the pipeline. But I would love to see him come in and bolster those attacking ranks even further. And I think he'd fit in perfectly in that McAllister type role and just provide even more competition for places in the squad and provide that European experience that will be so vital in the Europa League. And I think Brighton should definitely do what they can to bring him in if they can and persuade Ajax to sell. And I'd also love to see Colwill to come back from Chelsea as well. And it does look unlikely at the moment, but he was really at home at Brighton last season. And he fit so well alongside Lewis Dunk in that defence. And I would love to see at least another season of it, really, even if they do only bring him back online.
Yeah. Ian, who's on your wish list?
Well, I don't think, ever the eternal optimist, I don't think the Colwill deal's dead yet. I think we've got this £100 million conundrum. I think as both Frankie and Sam have rightly said, Caicedo's going to be pretty miffed. I think that's the word we can use on a podcast. Pretty miffed that he doesn't get his transfer. And I think, at the end of the day, I think Colwill liked it down here. He's a young English player. I think we should be with Caicedo as the bait. We should be moving heaven and earth. If you throw Gallagher into the mix, again, exciting times. You mentioned, Sam, there about the squad being a bit big, but I think playing Thursday, Sunday for a 6-week period, I think we're actually going to need that, aren't we?
100%. 100%. Yeah, definitely.
Remember the semi-final of the FA Cup where, I don't want to be unkind, but we basically ran out of options on the bench.
Yeah.
The only option that we didn't use, which we should have done, is to hook Sanchez off and put Jason on for the penalty shootout. But we'll, you got to leave that one, Harty. You got to park it. But no, I just think it is exciting times. As I said, boys, you lot are a lot younger than me, and I'm living in a dreamland at the moment. I bought my grandson a new kit yesterday. His first kit. His dad supports Spurs, but his granddad supports Brighton, so we'll leave it at that.
Did you get the green? Did you get the green and black one? Or?
No, I got the blue and white one. His first kit was always going to have to be blue and white stripes. I just think it is exciting times. I think the Caicedo thing will ultimately sort itself out. I don't think if he does line up against Luton Town, I don't really think him and his agent can blame the Albion. Let's just hope common sense prevails. We know who we want on our roster. There were 2 players crying out to come down to the south coast. They'll suit Brighton's style of play. You know, Caicedo, thanks for the good couple of years. We wish you well. You move on, but every man has a price. And well played, Tony Bloom. I don't want to sound like a crack record. Sticking to his guns, the £100 million. Let's go for it.
Okay. Frankie, Brighton are an attractive club to join, aren't they, at the moment? Who would you like to see coming in between now and the end of the window?
Yeah, they certainly are. Not only are they attractive in the sense that they had a brilliant season last year, or the fact that they are now renowned as being a really well-run club. They've got the most exciting manager. Truth be told, he plays great football. He's got that Mourinho-like quality in his interviews. The players all love working under him and saying he's a very intense manager to work under, but they really appreciate that. So I think the most attractive thing for any young player is to work with one of the most exciting managers in Europe while he's still at Brighton. So I think for someone like Conor Gallagher or Cole Palmer, 2 young players who still have got bags of potential, haven't quite hit the heights yet. Certainly Conor Gallagher, who has not really got going after that brilliant loan spell at Crystal Palace. I think one of them through the door would really help Brighton in the sense that they're 2 quality players, but would also help their own careers, which would be great for themselves. They deserve it, and also for England as well going forward. So either one of those 2 players coming in, either on a loan deal, certainly Palmer would be a loan deal, but Gallagher, I'm not sure whether that'd be a loan deal or a transfer. But one of the players through the door would be great. Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. Let's see what happens for the rest between now and the rest of the transfer window. But keep up to date with all the latest news and all the latest signings on National World, and we'll see where Moises Caicedo ends up and whether Brighton sign any more players between now and the end of the transfer window.